Hello, we had a request to take a look at this Killer Sudoku on the channel. I think this is going to be monstrously hard. It's a 10 out of 10 difficulty puzzle on dailykillersudoku.com. So if your bag is very, very hard Killer Sudokus, then do go and visit the site, pause the video, maybe note down the pattern and see if you can solve it. This might not be the best video for people who are new to Killer Sudokus to have a look at, because I do think it's going to be tricky. But anyway, let's start. And you can actually see there is a place to start here, which is here and here, where we have, my mouse sensitivity down a bit, these 3x3 blocks here. We already have cages that total in this one 7 plus 10, 17, 12 is 29, 37. So in order to make this 3x3 blocks add to 45, which is necessary for all 3x3 blocks in any Sudoku, because it will contain the numbers from 1 to 9, exactly once each. This is going to have to be an 8. We can do the same trick down here, so you can see these 10 plus 10 plus 15 plus 5 add to 40, so this has to be a 5. Okay, now where do we go from here? Wondering whether we can do something with the 12 and 10 combination in this block. So if, for example, these were 5 and 7 here, just to show you, then everything gets very restricted. The 8 would now have to be 2 and 6, and this could only be filled with a 1 and a 9, this 10 block here. If, on the other hand, this was 3 and 9, which is the other alternative now that the 8's gone, what happens? Well, you can see this then would have to be 4 and 6. Now, that is interesting. So what we've just managed to deduce is that this either contains a 4, this 10 block, or it contains a 1. Why does that matter? Well, look, there's a 5 cage here. This 5 cage now cannot be of the variety 1, 4, 1, 4. Because this 10 block then would not be fillable. So in fact, this is 2, 3, 2, 3. Now maybe that might help us. Okay, yes. So now the 10 cages here, the only ways of making these 10 cages both work is with obviously 1s and 9s and 4s and 6s. So this 15 cage is now a 7, 8 cage. That is certain. I'm tempted to fill in the possibilities for this block actually, just to see if it gives us anything useful. Let's do that. So if this is 5, 7, 5, 7, this is 2, 6, 2, 6. This will have to be 1, 9, 1, 9. This will be 3, 4, 3, 4. If, on the other hand, this is 3, 9, 3, 9, this has to be 4, 6. Now this can only be filled with 2, 5, 2, 5 now, and this can only be filled with 1, 7, 1, 7. So either way round, you can see that the 7s are locked into these 4 squares. Now, the 7s in this 3x3 blocks are also locked into columns 7 and 8 as well. So we now know that the 7 in this middle 3x3 block must be over here, like this. And obviously the other two numbers will make 10 and will be the version of the 10 that we don't use up here. Okay. Oh, didn't do that. So you can see this 37 big massive cage here. These two cells therefore have to sum to 8 in order to make sure that the whole block sums to 45. So there are 2 ways that can happen, which is shown there. Let's fill in the possibilities for this 10 cage as well. Now, can we do anything with that fact? Well, there is a relationship also between this square here and this square here. As you can see, imagine, just for the sake of argument, this square is a 7. Then we know these 6 squares must sum to 30, because it's part of a 37 cage. Now, 30 plus 10 plus 15 plus 5 is another 30, plus 24 gives 84. So that would make this a 6. So you can see that whatever this number is, this number here is 1 less than it. So what does that mean? Well, that means a few things, I guess. So this can't be 8 or 9, because then this would be a 7 or an 8 and clash with this. Could be a 7, I think. That would make that a 6. 6 would make this a 5. That looks alright. It can't be a 5 because we already have a 5 here. Can't be a 1 because then this would be a 0. So 2, 3, 4 are the other chances there, which give 1, 2 and 3 as the alternatives for this number. And on these very hard puzzles, this is unfortunately, you know, some of the things that you, or some of the logic that you need to pursue in order to crack these puzzles normally. They are not straightforward. Similarly, column 1 here, you've got this 32 cage coming down. So we know this cage, or this square, and this square sum to 13. So we know that the 1, 2 and the 3 are not in this square and this square in the column. So we might as well, just in case, it's going to be helpful, note down the options there. You can see that the 9 in row 8 is forced into these 3 squares because there can't be a 9 in either of these 2 squares. And I guess this 33 cage here, these 2 squares have to sum to 12 without using an 8. So the options here will be 3, 9, 3, 9, 5, 7, 5, 7, like that. And you can see if we look at what's possible along here, we need, the 8 is going to appear actually in one of these 3 cells. So we can rule out the 8 here, which means we can rule out the 5 there. Oh, this 27 cage, look, we couldn't have a 1 or a 2 here. Because then this 27 cage, you can't make a number bigger than 24 in 3 cells. 7, 8 and 9 add to 24. So we can remove the 1 and the 2 there, which means we can remove the 6 and 7 here, and we can place a 6 or 7 here. Okay. Let's complete this 5 and 7. It's tricky, this. You can see that there's, again, for the same reasons that there was down here, because the puzzle's sort of symmetric. If we draw a line across this part of the grid here, if this is a 3, for example, we'd have 30 here, plus 29 is 59, 74, 86, so this would be a 4. So whatever this is, this number is 1 less. So does that help? You can see it doesn't give very much restriction at all. Probably, I mean, we could write it in, I guess. So it can't be an 8 because of this reason, and it can't be a 9 because then this would need to be a 10. And similarly, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This can't be a 9 because then this would be an 8. Can't be a 1, this would be a 0. So there's hardly any restriction there at all. Well, it's a bit of a shot in the dark, but let's see if we can work out whether there is a useful total by looking at the first 3 columns of the grid. You can see that this cage here and this cage here are the only ones that stick into those first 3 columns. So if we just do a quick bit of arithmetic, we might find something interesting. So 55, 70, 82, 82, 88, 106, so that's 29. That is a useful total. Good lord. Okay, so this square, this square, this square, and this square have to sum to 29. Now 29 in 5 squares is only possible if the numbers are 5, 7, 8, and 9. So eventually we're going to be able to write in, that can't be a 5, 5, 7, 8, and 9 down this column. Let's just fill in. So this square is very restricted now. This can only be a 3 or a 4, which means this can only be an 8 or a 9. I think that's restricted. 2, it's going to be 1, 2 or 4, 2, 4, 5 there. Okay, so maybe this will be a way of us making further progress. And you can see we've worked out these 4 cells need to sum to 29, and they're part of cages that sum to 50, 23 plus 27. So these 4 cells here also need to sum to 21, we can deduce from that. 21 in 4 cells is not a particularly useful total. But there's a really odd symmetry going on here, because if we look over this side of the grid, we've got this 30 cage here where we already have an 8 and a 5 in there, so that means these 3 squares sum to 17. 17 plus 16 is 33. So these 3 squares sum to 12. But these 3 squares are part of cages of 9, 9 and 18, which sum to 36. So these 4 squares here in the middle sum to 24. So not only do these 4 cells sum to 21, but so do these 4 cells as well. There is a symmetry between these. Now I don't quite yet understand how to use this, but it feels important. So this cell, this cell, this cell and this cell have the same total as this cell, this cell, this cell and this cell. And given that you can see here, if this is a 6, this will be forced to be a 6 as well. Then we can also say, I think, that these, and you can see it at the moment, it's already true, but whatever this cell equals, this cell will also equal. Now that might be interesting, because we might be able to test some of the possibilities there. It's like, must be something we can do with that. I'm not seeing quite how to do that. Well, we might be able to eliminate a number from this 18 cell. Look at this, 18. If this is a 4, we need to make 14 in these 2 squares, which would mean this would have to be a 6 and this would have to be an 8. But this can't be an 8, because we know the 8 is up here, because there's nowhere else an 8 can go in row 7. So this can't be a 4, which means this can't be a 9. I wonder if there's more we can do with that. So I'm wondering now whether the elimination of this 9 up here could be important. So where can we place a 9 in this box? Well, can we place it in the 15 cage? If this was a 9, this would have to be a 4, and this would have to be a 2. But that's impossible, because if this is a 9, this will be an 8, and this will be a 4, so we'd have 2 4s in the block. So there is no 9 in this square either. That's interesting. So I'm just wondering if we can use that. So now if we look at column 2, we need to put a 9 somewhere in the column. And a 23 cage in 6 can never contain a 9. Because if there is a 9 in 23 cage in 6, then the 5 numbers would have to add to 14, which is impossible. The minimum number that you can make with 5 digits is 15. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 add to 15. So there is no 9 in any of these squares. There's no 9 here. There's no 9 here. So the 9 in column 2 is either in this cell or it's in this cell. They are the only 2 possibilities. I have to do a bit of a grid stare here, because it feels to me fairly important there's this relationship between the possible positions of a 9 in column 2. And it is possible actually to relatively quickly prove that one of these doesn't work. So there's a few things that we've talked about in the video already that help us to do that. One of them is that if this is a 9, let's just work that through. If this is a 9 here, then this will be an 8 and this will be a 4. And then where can we place a 4 in this box here? Well, We know that the 4 over here is in the top line, so actually the 4 is forced to be here. And you remember we did all that work a few minutes ago to confirm that this square here will always be 1 bigger than this square here. So that's going to give this square is going to have to be a 5 after that. You can see this square therefore is starting to get very restricted. Now, and that's partly as a result of the effect that this 9 has down here as well, because once this is a 9, remember this 10 cell now has to be a 4 and a 6 in some order. We still need to fill the other 9 from the 2 cages here. So this will be a 9, so this cell and this cell need to add to 9. How can you do that if you can't use a 4 or a 6? And remember also, you can see the only option therefore would be for this to be a 7 and this to be a 2. Now, if that's the case, the 7 here means this cell have to add to 13 because of this 32 long block in column 1, so this is going to be a 6. Now how can you fill this now? You know, these 2 cells again now have to add to 9 without using 6, 3, 1, 8 or 4, 5. So in fact these 2 cells here have to be 2 and 7. So this will be a 7, this will be a 2. Now this cell here is forced to be a 9, but actually that's not going to work, because if this is a 9, we can actually show that this cell here is also a 9, just to continue on the logic that we have been using. We know this is going to be a 7, this is going to be a 9, so this cell here has to be an 8. We know the 1 along here is now forced into one of these 3 cells, making this a 2, this a 6, and this a 6. So we know we have an 8 and a 6 in these 2 cells. So these 2 cells have to add to 13. How can we do that now? Without using 5, 8 and 6, 7, because we already have an 8 and a 6 in the block. So the only way is going to be if they're 4 and 9 combination. Well, if it's 4, 9, the 9 will have to be here. So we're going to end up with a 9 here and a 9 here, if this is a 9. It's not a very elegant proof, if you like, but it is reasonably, it's not too difficult to see once you've done all that work that I had to do to identify there are only 2 cells in column 2 that could contain a 9. So all of that allows us finally to place a 9 here. And let's see what effect that has on the solve. Now 5, 7 is locked into here. It allows us to eliminate all sorts of things over in this block. You can see we can now place the 9 and the 1 into these 2 cells like that. And now what can we do? There's a couple of things, I guess, once the software works. You can see that the 9 is forced into one of these 2 cells. Now, because of the work we did earlier, we know there's parity between these 2 cells. So if this is a 9, this is a 9. If this is a 9, this is a 3, and this is a 3. So there's just no way this can be a 5 or a 7 anymore. We can do that and that, which is a nice thing to have proved. Now, where can we go from there? Okay, now, so what can we place? We can place the 4 and the 6 in here. Just 16. Just wondering what the restrictions are on this 16 cage now, given that we can't use a 6, a 7 or a 4 to make the total work. And you can see, because we need to either have an 8 or a 9 in this 16 cage. It's not possible to get up to 16 with 3 digits if we don't use 6, 7, 8 or 9. And obviously we can't use both because 8 and 9 together add to 17. So there's going to be exactly one of an 8 or a 9 in this 16 cage. Now, if we use 9, we need to make 7 as the other two digits, and we've already got the 4 and a 6 in this 3x3 block already, so the only way that could work is with a 2 and a 5. And if we do 8 instead, then we have a similar issue. We've already got a 6 and a 7, so then we'd have 3 and 5. So either way round, we can prove there is a 5 in this 16 cage. And that is actually helpful, because that means there must be a 5 here, and a 7 here, and a 7 here, and an 8 here. So we made a little bit of progress off the back of that. Now, because there's an 8 here, that means that there must be a 9 within these cells, which means we're also looking at 2, which again means we can make more progress again. We've got the 2 and the 6 resolved now. Let's get rid of the 6 here and this 4. 7, 2, 5, 9, and this 9. So you can see here, if we look at column 8 of the grid, we need to place 1, 3, and 4. Well, the only possibilities there is that because there's already a 3 here, so this must be the 3, it's the only place it can go. This is a 4. Remove that 4 there, and this 4. That means we can remove that 9. Six, 9 here. Now what can we do? We can look back at this 18 cage here. You can see, we know that the 8's in this part of this 3x3 block. It's in one of these top 3 cells, and we know that the 9 is not in this position. So this 9 is not in the 18 cage either. So how are we going to get to 18 without using an 8 or a 9? Well, the only way, I think, is with 7, 6 and 5. So we know that there is a 6 in here, therefore this can't be a 6. So let's put a 9 in here, and a 6 here, and that gives us a 7 there, a 7 there, and a 1 there, which is very nice. That allows us finally to make a bit more progress down this side. Okay, it feels like we're almost at the tipping point now, I think. Get rid of this 7. The 1, 4 is resolved. All 1. We know that this is 5, 6, 7 in some order, so in fact this must be the 6. This is 5, 7. 5, 7 like that. So this is now 2, 4, which means this is a 3. Hesitate to just say the rest of it is an exercise for the viewer, because these puzzles are seriously hard. 3, 4, and 8 now along here, so you can see that's got to be 4 and 8. That can't be a 9. 3, 4, 8, 3, 4, 8. So we can remove the 3 and the 4 there. This can now only be a 2 by the looks of things. And then there was a relationship between this 2 and this square. I think these had to be 1 apart, if I remember correctly. So let's trust the logic. That's got to be a 1. Here. So we're looking, are we at 3, 8, 9 along this part of the grid? Now we can remember these cells have to sum to 13, so 6 is possible, 8 is possible, 7 is no longer possible. Okay, and this can't be a 6, so this is very restricted now. This is a 1, this has to be 6 and 8. I can't see why that would be ruled out. If this is a 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, I can't quite rule that out, annoyingly. Can't see anything better here than trying to focus on these 2 squares again. So we know these 3 have to sum to 20, so if this was 8, 9, 8, 9, this would have to be a 3. 5 and 8 won't work, because that would make this a 7. 5 and 9 would work, and that would make this a 6. Now remember, the work we did earlier suggested these 4 cells here had to sum to, I think, 21. So we've already got 7 here, so these 3 cells need to sum to 14. So how is that going to work? Well, if this is a 9, this will have to be 3 and this will have to be 2. That's forced. If this isn't a 9, this will be a 3 and this will be a 6, so this will have to be a 5. So the only options for this square now, in fact, are 2 and 5. Now that ought to be useful. Oh, there's a nice bit of logic on column 1 here. So let's ask ourselves the question, where can a 2 go in column 1? Can go here, can't go here, and it could go in any of these 3 positions. But look, we need to think about this 23 cage now. This 23 cage, is it possible it doesn't contain a 2? That would be the first question, and the answer to that is no. If we add up the numbers 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, we get, can't quite work it out, but it's definitely beyond 18 plus 8, 26. Yeah, so it's beyond 23. So we know there is a 2 somewhere in this 23 cage. Now, it can't be here because of this 2, and it can't be here because of this 2. So we know that the 2 is in the 23 cage in this 3 by 3 block. So none of these squares contains a 2. So we're only left with one position now where we can place a 2. And that's there. In this block here. Now that means this has got to be a 1. So we're now looking at 14, which means we have to have 8 and 6 in here. Which means this is 2, 5 and 7 in some order, which allows us to place the 7. Gives us an interesting 2, 5 double in column 4. And probably a lot of other things besides. This feels, again, this does feel like the tipping point now. I know I keep thinking I might have found it, but we're getting quite close. 5, 7, so 4, 6, 8 along here. And we know there's a relationship between this cell and this cell. They have to differ by 1, so that makes sense with what we've got. That all looks like it's working. This now has to be a 1. It's the only place a 1 can go. Can I move this 1 here? Move this 6 here, so we have a 2, 4 double. 3, 8. Oh, that's interesting. Look, neither of these cells can contain an 8 because that would clash with the 1 that would then need to go into these cells. So we can remove the 8s there, and that gives us an 8 into this cell. So these 9s now are looking at 6 and 8. That gives us a 6, 8 pair there, which is also nice. 6, 8, in fact, allows us to place a 4. So we can now also place this 3 down here. And we're left with, what, 5 and 9, I think, for this column. You can see this can't be a 9, it would make the cage too big. That's going to have to be the 5, that's going to be the 9, last allowing us to place this. Just to complete this cage now, that central square is going to be a 4, 4, 8, 8, 6, like that. Okay, and we're looking at 5 and 6 into these squares, so that has to be this way round. Which actually allows us to finally resolve all this. Good lord. Well, it's been a fascinating puzzle, this, but certainly not easy. Now we know that's got to be a 2 because of the logic we did earlier. And that total of these have to be equal to 21. We can now remove the 9 here. And we get 2 into this position. 4 here and a 2 here. 3, 6, 7 to these positions, just to complete the row. Okay, we can resolve this 1, 3 finally as well. So thank you very much for whoever it was, I can't remember the name now, who recommended this puzzle. I'm not sure if you did it as because you enjoy Schadenfreude or what, but it has been very challenging. It's about as challenging a killer Sudoku as we've covered on the site so far. And we do like to stretch ourselves from time to time, and we appreciate that this video might not be for everybody, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't occasionally cover things that are seriously hard. Fill these cages in now, 6 and 8. So these need to add to 17, so that forces it to be this way round. Actually, this means this has to be the 9, I think. This has got to be a 3. 7, 7, 5. So it's got to be a 4 over here. 4, 6, 7. 3, 6, 6, 8. And does that make this an 8, I think? Yep. And 4 and 5 to play. Oh, jeepers, it's still resisting slightly, isn't it? Okay, so let's use the cage totals here. You can see 9 and 12. These two numbers have to add to 11. Which means this is 4. Finally, there we go. So, a lengthy video, but for some of you, I'm sure interesting. Please let us know in the comments if you'd like us to cover more puzzles at this sort of standard. And we'll see you again next time on Cracking the Cryptic.